Hello, everybody, and welcome to another gathering for the Reformed Church Center. Today, we get to hear from our 2020-2021 Albert A. Smith Fellow in RCA History. This hadn't been the plan originally. Once upon a time, before COVID, we had thought that he was going to be here last year and have been able to be in the library and all of that, but as we know, COVID cut off our access to lots of research and libraries and things that we planned to do. So this year he is our bonus lecture. Moving on to our program for today. First, we will hear from William Ruggles Church. He is a fellow of the American something of radiology, and it's just slipped out of my head at an awful time. And he is also, now that he's had a doctoral degree and he lived and worked an entire career, he did what all of us think we should be doing in our retirement, going back and getting another degree, right? He is working on a doctorate at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam and looking at the work of Samuel Zwemer, which is what his fellowship is a piece of today. And he will be telling you more about that. After that, we will have a response from James Jin-Hong Kim, who is professor of missiology and global Christian studies here at New Brunswick Seminary, and is online, and he'll come on and share with us when the time comes, and then we will open up the discussion for everybody. So with that very simple, but probably wordier than it needed to be introduction, I welcome William Church.
Well, thank you very much. Today we're going to be talking about medical care and its relationship to evangelism in mission. I am a friend of Chuck Van Ingen in Holland, and he conveys his greetings to many of you as people from Western Seminary do as well. I know he knows a lot of you, and they do as well. And I want to also give you thanks for hosting me as the Albert A. Smith Fellow this year, or last year, now this year. It has really been a pleasure. The people here at the New Brunswick Seminary have been very gracious to me and very helpful to me. I've spent time in the dusty archives and spent time in the beautiful Sage Library. There is a marble statue in the Sage Library, the main room, which I hope you all have taken the time to see who it represents. It represents Hagar and Ishmael. And that statue is placed there, or given to be placed, by Professor Dr. John Lansing, who in the 1880s was a professor of Old Testament languages at New Brunswick Theological Seminary. And he was inspirational to many of his students, and particularly James Cantine and Samuel Zwemer, who I'll be talking about. And he instilled in them the love of Hebrew, but also the love of Arabic and Arabia and Arabs. Lansing, with Cantine and Zwemer, formed the Arabian Mission in 1899. Lansing often spoke of that Arabia was neglected, the neglected peninsula. And he also figuratively would speak of Ishmael as the prodigal son of the Old Testament. Now, many people believe that the descendants of Ishmael represent the Arab population of Arabia. And those three people who formed the Arabian Mission had a heart for the Muslim people and Arab people. So the title of this presentation is Samuel Zwemer's mission motives and the relationship of medical care to evangelism. Just to confirm that I have done some research here and have found good things, I found one little colorful phrase that Zwemer used as he was in the process of building the first hospital in Bahrain. And it combines his emphasis on medical care and evangelism. And he said he wanted to protect the donations of the people that gave money to build this hospital. And he said he wanted to build a Bethel and a Bethsaida. He wanted to build a place where the word of God was spoken and a place where healing happened. So if we can, I'd like to start with a moment of prayer, if that's okay. Holy God, great God, quicken our hearts and guide our minds to your way, to your mission for the lost. Help us to know that people are waiting for us. And we pray that in the name of Jesus, our Lord and Savior. Thank you. Amen. Well, I was born in New York City, not too far from here. I was raised in the RCA. I went to Hope College. I went to McGill University for medical school. I went to the University of Michigan for internship and residency in, and I became a diagnostic radiologist. The only thing, James, I've ever known to forget, couldn't get, was the American College of Radiology that I was part of. Well, as a radiologist, I did many short-term medical missions to Christian medical facilities, mostly hospitals in many places in the world. And I would take an ultrasound machine there and teach the missionary career missionary doctor there how to use it. And ultrasound is a wonderful window into the body, and very helpful in their practice. Well, over the years, I've been kind of an independent student of a lot of things. I always liked Christian apologetics, and after 9/11, I got I started reading about Islam. I realized initially I didn't know very much about it, and I did not believe what they espoused, but I tried to understand in greater depth who they were and what they believed. And so I devoted myself to that for a lot of years. And then I decided to go to Western Seminary and get a master's degree. I just wanted to refocus again on Christian history and Old New Testament, systematic theology, and those sorts of things. And that was a delightful experience. About 10 years ago, I first started hearing about Zwemer or reading about Zwemer. And he tweaked my interest for a lot of reasons. And I became particularly interested in his the medical aspects of what Zwemer did. And I had been asked by someone to perhaps to write a chapter about the medical aspects of Zwemer's mission life, and was going to do that, and was collecting notes for that. That got put on hold for good reasons. So I had friends, and they just sort of encouraged me, well, you know, you should write this anyway. And that's how I sort of backed into a PhD. And the project has been lots of fun. And hard work, but lots of fun. Samuel Zwemer, he was of Dutch extraction. His father was a pastor. They lived in Michigan for some of their life. As a child, as a young person, he knew that he wanted to be a missionary. And he had the desire to be a doctor. but he had a lot of brothers and sisters and limited resources in the family, and he did not go to medical school. He had a number of people in his family that became ministers, and a number of family members that became missionaries as well. But he eventually went to Hope College, and then he went to New Brunswick Theological Seminary, and he's just another one of the great students that come out of New Brunswick Theological Seminary. But while he was at seminary, he maintained his interest in medicine. And he knew as a missionary, he wanted to be able to do medical care. And so he read a lot of medical textbooks, including Gray's Anatomy. He befriended doctors and would go to their clinics and sit under their tutelage of how to do things and how to suture, and learn some dental work, and actually was reasonably good at sort of primary simple medical care. Well, in 1890, he joined Cantine, who had been in Arabia for a year, and the Arabian mission was underway. It was initially independently sponsored, but was soon the RCA adopted it as the mission agency sponsoring the Arabian mission. While there, Zwemer rapidly realizes that there are things he sees that in medical conditions that people present with that he can't handle. And not only can he not handle everything, but the volume of things that is presenting is way over his head. And so he immediately starts, in fact, he was recruiting physicians even before he got on the mission field. But on the mission field, he very adamantly is recruiting doctors to come to the mission field. So with Zwemer, I had a lot of things that I felt parallel interests in. He was interested in medicine, he was interested in missions, he was interested in Christian theology, he was interested in the study of Islam. He knew he was the master of Arabic, and most of those things, maybe I did medicine better than he did, but I think he did everything else substantially better than I did. Well, as I started to study him, one thing I noticed was that, well, he's a prolific writer. He writes about 50 books, and he writes a lot of other things and edits journals and whatnot. But I noticed in his writings, he talks a lot about his reasons for evangelism as part of mission. But that it seemed to me he hardly ever mentioned the reason he does medical care as part of mission. Now, he would mention that he studied this, or he saw, plague, or he saw malaria this day or that day, but he didn't really mention his motives for doing that. He spends about 15 years on the mission field, and he spends about several years working with the student volunteer movement, trying to recruit missionaries for multiple places in the world, but he had in mind the mission hospital as well. Then he accepts God's call, I believe, to a wider sense of mission. I call him at this point a missionary at large. He's in Cairo for about 15 years and is teaching missionary students. And then he goes for about 15 years at Princeton Theological Seminary with addressing teaching in missions as well. Well, the Arabian mission it flourished under the time that Zwemer was there, and after he left, as he was sort of a statesman for it and an advocate for it and a fundraiser for it. They established 6 stations, and each of the stations at some point in time, and much of the time, had hospitals. And at the time he died in 1952, there had probably been 90 missionaries who had served at the Arabian missionary or mission. After 1952, the Arabian mission starts to dwindle for a variety of reasons that maybe we'll touch on later. But Zwemer, you can see his nature and his function and purpose, and in one of the ways, one of the methods he uses for mission. He doesn't define it this way. He talks about loving Muslims and forming friends. But what I call it is building bridges of love continuum. It starts with God loves us, and it goes on with the great commandment that we're supposed to love God and love others. And Zwemer does that. And it continues with conscious emphasis on a continuum of things that they do to establish friendship and build relationships. So he was very intent on being a good listener, and tried to understand Muslims, tried to understand Islamic religion and culture. He enculturated as best he could. He learned the language masterfully. He befriended everybody he could. He served especially with medical care, and developed a sense of belonging, and wanted to bring people to the point of seeking Christianity in some regard, or being aware of it, and building momentum towards evangelism. In all this, medical care was the linchpin. It combined love and evangelism. And for Zwemer, the goal was evangelism, especially verbal evangelism, and conversion. And so in all this, Zwemer was pretty successful with his medical care, and he recruited and he fundraised for hospitals, and they tried to be witnesses, gracious witnesses. This building of bridges of love, it also opened opportunities for Zwemer to what I call speak the truth in love to Islam. When he first went there, he had sort of a polemic a style and approach, and liked to speak to groups of Muslims. Over a short period of time, he shifted to a more ironic style, and favored speaking with individuals. It's not that he didn't preach to groups occasionally still, but he wasn't going out of his way to speak the truth. But if it had to be, and it was just appropriate at the moment, that building the truth or building bridges of love helped that possibility. Well, I think I call Zwemer the Renaissance man, because the Renaissance, you can the person that you're talking about seems to do everything. You know, they're artists, they're circumnavigators of the world, they're whatever. But Zwemer, in my mind, was sort of like that. He was a wonderful personality. He would dominate the room, had a wonderful sense of humor, was a great musician, a good artist, good poet, enjoyed poetry, really good with languages, good with theology, good with Muslim studies. He applied himself quite well, I think. So in this little bit, we are meeting Zwemer. We're seeing a little bit of who he is and what he does, and predominantly focusing on medical care. And that starts to give us some clues as to what Zwemer's motives might be for using medical care. If you were reading the thesis, at this point, you would realize that the next chapters have to do with many quotations of what Zwemer said about love as the method, and medical care as the linchpin, and evangelism as the goal, and what other missionaries there and other authors say about that. So in all this, we're gathering clues as to what his motives are. Just for a moment, I'm going to let you know what the research questions of this thesis are. The first two are sort of general questions and would cover missions that really happened anywhere in the world, although for Zwemer, it focuses on, the setting is in Arabia. But the primary research question is, what were Zwemer's foundational thoughts and motivational ideas supporting service, particularly medical care, as it relates to evangelism? And the second question would be, would Zwemer consider medical care by itself to be a form of proclamation? So the first was, what were Zwemer's foundational thoughts and motivational ideas supporting service, particularly medical care, as it relates to evangelism? And the second, would he consider medical care by itself as a form of proclamation? The third question is a little more specifically directed to Arab people, or at least to the Islamic world. And now, what were Zwemer's particular understandings of the role of medical care as service in mission specific to the Islamic world? And we'll get back to those a little bit, but I believe this overall subject has some interest. I think there are tensions in the world of mission thinking, and some real life problems and things seeking direction. And we know about the evangelical ecumenism dichotomy of styles of mission. We know that people question whether medical care should be part of mission. We know there are contextualization issues, and John Travis and people like that are discussing that. What to do with Muslim background believers, where do they fit in? And Phil Parshall and people like him are, and what to do with understanding folk Islam, and Dudley Woodbury and people like him are doing it. And just dealing with issues like spiritual warfare. Well, then what are Zwemer's motives? And I'll talk about his motives for medical care particularly. Now, he obviously has general motives that would apply to all mission endeavors, theological motives and biblical motives and Christian motives, which I am not going to touch on at this moment. What I'm going to address is his practical motives for medical care. And now I told you he doesn't write about this a lot. And so there is not a lot of material about this, but I believe there is enough. And I have been diligent about finding it, and will continue to look for it as well. But I think I have discovered it. The number one motive would be that medical care meets need. And it seems maybe too close, but for Zwemer, the way he described it, the second reason was that medical care meets need effectively. And so it met physical need. People would come with illnesses and be healed or relieved of pain, and that effect was obvious. It met spiritual needs. Now, sometime evangelism may require more explanation, but it has its own justification, and medical care did engender, for Zwemer at least, and evangelism. Medical care engendered evangelism. So it met physical need, it met spiritual need, it met the need of the Arabian mission itself to remain present in what could be a somewhat hostile setting. But as they were present, they were able to continue Christ-like doing of things, including medical care, and Christ-like living of their own lives was visible. And in some ways, the local population was influenced by that in their own thinking and doing. And linked to that, it met community needs. Now, this is a harder one to put in a one sentence elevator speech, but I'll approximate it here as best as I can quickly. But the community needs I'm talking about are things associated with some realities in formal Islam, some things which at least some people would say Islam lacks, and which overlap with folk Islam, which tries to respond to some things in Islam. I'm talking about things like fatalism and superstition and women's issues and children's issues, and at least some people looking at Islam in comparison with Christianity is lacking love, lacking means of atonement, lacking means of salvation, lacking means of really knowing God. So, for example, about fatalism, early on, the Zwemer and the doctors and nurses were there. They would do the best they can to convince patients that they knew what they were doing and could help. But early on, trachoma was very frequent. Trachoma is an eye disease, and it's an infection, and it results in the eyelids turning inside out. They sort of invert, and in such a way that eventually the eyelashes are scraping against the surface in the cornea of the eye, and left untreated, the child eventually will go blind. Now, when they see this, they try to convince the family, the parents, that they could fix this with a fairly simple surgery that will re-invert the eyelids. Well, eventually they do convince a few, and then more and more people see this, and what they used to say, oh, this is God's will, and Allah, is in charge, and if Allah thinks the child's going to go blind, the child will go blind and not do anything. But once they start doing it and show that something can be done, well, it alters their sense of fatalism to some extent. And like with superstition, I mean, evil spirits would dominate in many ways people's lives, and sometimes they felt they were what they were suffering, they were cursed by an evil spirit. Well, if the doctors could ameliorate that condition, with medicine or surgery or whatever, it modifies to some degree people being overly or negatively affected by superstition and animism and that sort of thing. So a third motive then was the first was meeting the needs and doing so effectively, and then the third is that he picked up on Lansing's idea that Arabia was neglected by the Christian church for centuries, and that's sort of a specific one of his. Well, what are the answers to the thesis questions? The first question has to do with the relationship of medical care and evangelism. And the answer is that evangelism is the primary focus. It has priority. It's the more important partner. Zwemer sees them as partners. They're ands, they're together. and they're giving each other momentum. But medical care is necessary, but a lesser partner. It's helpful. It's often done first, but it's not the primary focus. Zwemer held that evangelism should be the primary purpose of mission, and especially so in the Islamic world. So in answer, Zwemer held that service with medical care in the Arab world enabled the possibility of evangelism. And he emphasized the and link in the work and word combination of integral mission. He balanced medical service and evangelism, and he felt that evangelism was the primary importance, and service was necessary. And then in regard to the question about medical care delivery being a form of proclamation, Zwemer felt that there were circumstances, and sometimes frequently circumstances, where evangelism was not possible. And in those circumstances, medical care to him did suffice as proclamation, as it demonstrated God's love. And this was especially so if in the least it was done in the name of Jesus. So, for Zwemer, however, though, there was always the intent to do evangelism. So the answer to the question is yes, when it needed to be so and couldn't be done for good circumstances or reasons. But the answer is no if the intention was not to evangelize. The third one, regarding the observation that there are community needs, and that as a consequence of medical care and presence, community needs could be somewhat met and social development could happen. So we see that Zwemer recognized that medical care did help these specific community needs, including things like evil spirits and superstition and fatalism and folk Islam and women and children issues. Well, in all this, it's we recognize that all this mission work, there were very few converts, which is also not terribly unlike other mission endeavors in the Islamic world. Muslims have varied responses to a message about Christianity or the gospel message. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes they're violently against it. Sometimes they disparage it. Sometimes they're curious. Sometimes they might even be a seeker. As Zwemer noticed, he favored more and more talking to individuals, and part of that in groups, there's a very strong sense of community in the Islamic world, and nobody wants to be the one to be open to Christianity in a group. But the reality is, in a one-on-one situation, often Muslim people were curious about what Christians believed or thought, and medical care seemed to lean towards that there were circumstances in which you were one-on-one with patients. And well, what are the reasons that there are few converts? And there are many, can't mention them all, but there's kind of an intrinsic resistance to Christianity and Islam. And sometimes people are fanatical about that. And that there can be personal risk to a person if they're seeking or converting to Islam. And in many ways, to do so, Muslims give up everything in their life. They may give up their job, their family, and to convert is a huge undertaking for a Muslim. And the law of apostasy, isn't always applied by governments, but individuals or family or whatever, it's possible that the consequences of it to to a Muslim background could be deaf. But also, it doesn't happen because the setting of mission doesn't allow enough discipleship. You see a patient for a while, or they're an inpatient for a while, but adequate time for discipleship is rarely available. And as Zwemer would say, there was always an insufficiency of the number of mission workers. And so what is not known, however, is, well, I would say this, probably the number of Christian converts that the Arabian mission had was probably around 100 in their years. Hard to say. It's expressed in lots of different ways and not always given a definite number. But what is not known is the number of secret believers, and it's really unknown. My suspicion is it's not a huge number, but I think they were strongly believed that there were secret believers. And this is another issue in theological thinking. Is this are you negative about allowing that, or are you open to allowing that, or equivocal about it? And I have to admit, it's still one of the things that puzzles me. Secret believers in the Islamic world. Well, after the death of Zwemer and in the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s, the RCA support for the Arabian mission was wavering, and in part due to few converts, but that clearly wasn't the only reason. There were other legitimate considerations that the RCA had, including finances and competition from government hospitals that are now supported by oil money, and so one of the things is that in comparison to a few converts, one of the weightiest things that Zwemer does, though, is mobilize mission workers in the world. So we've met Zwemer, we've heard from him, and now we start to analyze who he is and what he did. The motive is, or the method is love and creating friendships. Medical care is the linchpin. It's the right thing to do, but it's not an end in itself. And evangelism is the primary goal. And medical care made evangelism more relevant and unforced, and medical care sometimes opened closed doors, and evangelism could happen. He encouraged evangelism. So at this point, I'm going to pause and open it up for comment and discussion, and we'll talk about other things as questions and answers or comments come up. So I'm going to leave it there, and thank you for your time.
Well, and actually at this point, the first one who gets to comment and respond will be James Jinhong Kim from our own missiology department. So Jinhong?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Church, for the very informative and thought-provoking talk. It's a great way to commemorate Zwemer's accomplishment, laying down missional foundation in the West Asia. Also, to record RCA's and New Brunswick's own history of a great commitment to global mission. Occasions like this inspire us to think about how we can continue to build on that tradition of global mission today. In fact, already for 3 times, the Center had a pilgrimage program of taking MBTS students and RCA pastors to Oman's Al Amana Center to observe existing mission programs on site. With further donations and grants I hope we would be able to take more students to Oman for credit and scholarship in the future. So many would agree, even today, with what Zwemer said on many occasions, that the most difficult of all missionary tasks is the evangelization of the Muslim world. In fact, during his 39 years of mission work among Arabs, Zwemer saw less than a dozen converts, according to mission historian Ruth Tucker, and not including secret believers mentioned by Dr. Church, I think. And today, by some accounts, more Christians are converting to Islam than the other way around. So what makes the Muslim world so difficult to evangelize then and now? And how do they challenge us to rethink our understanding and approach to mission? For his part, Zwemer became a lifelong student of Islam, and as a prolific writer for Christian missions, he became instrumental for inspiring interest in missions to the Muslim world and recruiting missionaries and fundraising for such missions. It also led to his rethinking the approach to mission. As Dr. Church talk today demonstrated, for Zwemer, medical care became the linchpin between love and evangelism. The RCA scholar, Dr. Vanderwerf, we know him very well, described this kind of approach to mission as Christocentric anthropological. That is, emphasizing the importance of the cross in Christian faith, but adapting the methodology for its demonstration or substantiation to the particularity of each given context. But this raises a question. Taking Zwemer's approach, should our faith in God simply mean waiting another century and perhaps another in hope that such persevering medical care and educational services will result in evangelical fruits? At least, is it the better option to force the conversions and colonial domination of other cultures? Instead of furthering such a binary approach to mission, I want to share with you the different kind of questions raised by your fellow RCA pastors and seminary students when I took them to visit Oman and the Al-Amanah Center to observe the legacy of Zwemer's work on location. I often witnessed the students, including myself, in my first experience, were overwhelmed by just being there, seeing the life and culture among Muslims. Reverend Myers, director of Al-Amanah Center, is with us here, and I'm sure he would be more appropriate person to say this. Every religion affects culture, but Islam, as a relatively recently developed religion, really permeates every aspect of culture and social life in the region. One might say Islam is practiced as culture, and even the unity of Islamic nations today is founded in large part on this shared culture. It is different with Christianity, which is a doctrine-centered religion. We can separate faith from culture because faith to us is packaged as doctrine. As long as we confess to the accepted doctrine of Christianity, what we do culture-wise doesn't make us any less Christian. For the students who visit Oman for the first time with me, it is a moment they can feel the different energies of Christianity as a doctrine-centered religion. Encountering Islam as a religion rooted in its own culture, especially in West Asia, where the religion originated. Thinking about how Zwemer alerted us a century ago to the difficulty of Christian evangelism in the Muslim world, which is still true even today, my question to all of us is, how should we then live together? What would be a fair starting point for interfaith dialogues? And with what goals? How should we understand the relationship between doctrine and culture? Can we maintain the cross as the core of the gospel and at the same time give full respect toward the Islamic understanding of Christology? Zwemer was a pioneer for rethinking the approach to mission in his time. I hope this occasion will inspire all of us to continue his legacy by rethinking the mission in today's local context or our time.
Thank you, Jin Hong. We're so glad to have you here with us. Now is the time when we will open the floor up for anybody to discuss. I remind you to find the reaction button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on that, and there you'll find a raise hand button. If you raise your electronic hand, we'll be able to call on folks in the order that they raise their hands. If you raise your physical hand, I'm afraid we're just not going to see you as much as we would like to. And then you'll be able to unmute and turn your camera on. And then we would ask you to mute yourself after you're done speaking. So does anybody have a question, a comment they'd like to get us started with here?
If there's a pause while people are thinking, I've been to the Alamana Center. Justin Meyer, I think you're on there somewhere. And greetings. I went to the Church on the Hill in Flushing, New York, and Justin happened to be the pastor there before he went to the Alamana Center. So hello to Justin.
Yeah, I guess since my name's being invoked, I should say hello.
And your hand is up. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I guess since my name is being invoked, I should turn on the camera and say a few things. Yeah, thank you for your presentation on Zwemer. I think most of what you said is on what I've discovered over the years, but I've also discovered too that Zwemer was not the whole mission as well, and there was much disagreement between the missionaries back in the day. What their goals and their missions were. I've been struck in the past by a quote from John Van Ness, who was definitely Zwemer's contemporary. He was giving a lecture at a mission conference in Cairo in 1906, and he said, "Finally, our aim is to make converts, and to that end, we stretch all our energies and spend our money. But is that really our aim?" He asked. "Suppose now that we have the convert, does our endeavor stop there? Suppose the whole world converted, is that our goal? Our duty, rather, our whole work only begins there. Our aim then is not converts, not churches, not schools, but harmony with God." And so the seeds of where, in particular, even the Alamana Center is today, started way back then as well. Dr. Van Ness's wife remembers words from her mother that as you grow older, you may keep your own convictions, but you must learn to be tolerant of others' point of view and accept that the fact that times change. And I think one of the important distinctions we make at Alamana Center is the difference between evangelism and proselytization. And knowing that the two are often seen as one, but in our minds, they're not. And I think and much in the Muslim world, as James was talking about, it's a culture as well as a religion. And one of our goals is to be our full selves as Christians here in Oman and let the Holy Spirit do the work that it will. My Muslim friends here are often fond of quoting the Quran, saying that there is no compulsion in religion, and that it is up to God to convict somebody's heart as well. I see Nancy Scudder on here as well, and her husband had a wonderful quote at the end of his history of the Arabian Mission. He said, "What redeemed the Arabian Mission in most of its members is that it had given up the crusader's mind with which the mission had begun. It had found the liberation of the crucified mind, the mind of Christ, and that was the mind of the mission." Moving from the, in many ways, where Zwemer and people of his time were colonialists and kind of anti-Islam, much more of the people along the journey came to appreciate Islam and what it offered. Even Zwemer, toward the end of his life, acknowledged that his Muslim friends were much kinder to him than many of his Christian friends, and really regarded the service as the focal point. Timothy Harrison recalls that his father would talk about a tension between the evangelists and the medical missionaries, because the medical missionaries are afraid the evangelists would ruin their opportunity to go on these mission trips into the interiors of countries. And so as much as Zwemer was the pioneer, the mind of the mission was much more complex than the one man. And I think that for me is an important note, that over time, most everyone in the Arabian Mission in some ways reconciled themselves to Islam. And while evangelism was always close to the heart, the relationship to Islam changed and formed in different ways throughout time.
Okay, thank you, Justin. Does anybody else want to jump into this discussion a little bit?
Sure.
Go ahead, Nathan.
Good morning. Good morning, all. I wonder, Ruggles, if that might be something you might speak to, or if the research that you've been doing has revealed, rather than a sort of singular impetus or perspective on conversion, proselytization, what evangelization means. If even some of the ways of thinking about that may have been diverse, not just for those such as Van Ness who carried out that mission, but even just among the way the faculty of New Brunswick or students involved in the Society for Inquiry or missions at New Brunswick, or in American missions more generally by this time, by the 1890s, were thinking about this, because obviously those debates and divisions, it seemed, would have been things that a young Zwemer would have had to grapple with.
Yeah, I think Zwemer comes onto the field out of 19th century Protestant mission theology type thinking, but I think he also had the sense, I believe, that if they did the right service and did the right evangelization, that more people would be receptive to it than he anticipated. I think he rapidly realized that he reset his expectations of what was going to happen. I would say unequivocally that he had a high regard and respect and consideration for Muslims. And I would say this, he had a love of Muslims. So he never went to offend them. There was never a time when he even tried to obligate a Muslim to listen to his message as compensation to having been treated, that sort of thing. I think Zwemer was very transparent about his desire to do medicine. He had a tendency where, when he would go to different places in Arabia, that he would almost always try to contact the Sultan or the Imam or the Sheikh or whoever the local leader is. And he would tell that person, I am a Hakim, which is an Arabic word for healer. Said, I am a Hakim and I am a Christian teacher. So he would, right from the very go, would tell people who he is, and be transparent about it. He didn't always do it. Circumstances sometimes didn't allow it, or they were too busy, or there was too much adversity to it, or but when the opportunity arose, he would evangelize. And yes, I know there are, I am fully aware that there are different styles of mission thinking that evolved in the 20th century. This evangelical and ecumenism split. And there are reasons for both lines of thinking, but Zwemer was aware of it from its earliest inceptions at, in Cairo and Edinburgh early in the 1900s, and he became increasingly aware of it. He was aware of what happens with Hawking and the Layman's Conference, and but I think he was always engaged with it. I think he realized that, yes, you need to have points of contact with what Muslim thinkers are believing and espousing, and how they interpret their Quran and Hadith and that sort of thing. That he would use points of contact, but he was adamant that evangelism was primary in what he thought God had intended him to do. Now, in this academic pursuit of it, you got to be open to information from both sides. But I'm presenting the side that I think Zwemer held.
Okay, David Grunewald. Go ahead and unmute.
Okay. Hi there. So yeah, that's what I get for making a comment, but no, I feel the others are much more eloquent here, but I guess, yeah, the point that triggered me in my comment was taking on the crucified mind of Christ. And so the mission programs are so often in popular culture, well, okay, there's mission has colonialism associated with it, of course, and popular culture also has that. That's the people's immediate response when they hear about mission. I remember once talking to somebody at a swim club about some of the church's mission programs teaching English as a second language in Taiwan and East, and people they immediately assumed that we wanted to strip away their cultural heritage while we did that. And so it is very good that we are reminded to take on the crucified mind of Christ. And, it's difficult to do that. We want to be winners. We want to be triumphalists. Even as we talk about the second coming of Christ, it's hard to stay away from triumphal images of his return. But we're always invited to have the mind, as Paul said in Philippians, to have the mind of Christ, who did not count that power, that equality, that position of honor to be grasped, but to humble ourselves. And that's really the most gracious way to enter into any conversation and try to gain understanding and move toward peace and wholeness in our culture. So I guess I'm really just expounding on the poignancy of that invitation to put on the crucified mind of Christ. And so thank you, Justin, for bringing that out there, and for all of our missionaries and the mission programs who live that out in so many ways in our rich history of the Reformed Church. So I don't really have a question. I'm just expanding on some of my comment there. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jin Hong.
Yes, James, that I just want to make a comment on the what David shared with us, that the crucified minded, the mission is, I think the Zwemer had the same kind of mind, but I mean what he mentioned about the cross as the core of the gospel, but his intention was he made his theory in 1930s and 40s, mostly until 1950. And the crucified minded, the mission coined the term by Kosuke Koyama in 1973. So probably the terminology developed later, but probably would be the same thing that Zwemer in mind. But I mean, today, in my comment that I mentioned that, but after David Bush, that we just come up to the accepting what Zwemer or Kosuke Koyama mentioned about, that not just being one-way traffic of mission by Christian missionaries, but rather it would be two-way traffic. But however, I mean, in this 21st century, that we need to go further about understanding that their culture and their religious maxims. And so as, I mean, the Reverend Mayans Justin shared with us, that we need to go further to make it Justin used the term that harmony. So yeah, in that harmony, how should we live then together would be our question in our own time, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Junhong. Anybody else? Anybody else want to share a comment? I'll give you a minute. Okay, Justin, go ahead. You need to unmute, Justin.
Yeah, it's covered up. I just want to affirm that I think everything Ruggles has said about Zwemer is absolutely correct. And that's my understanding of Zwemer's mission too. And I do think he had a heart for the Muslim world. You know, I think it's what lessons do we learn from that and how do we apply it today is the academic question I wrestle with. I'm not a historian as such. I'm more of a practitioner of modern day. But I think there's a great appreciation for what Zwemer did in the Arab world today, but there's also a lot of critiques of it as well. And so it's one of these things where it's everything we do is a mixed blessing, and everything that we do is judged in time and not always fairly as well. But I do want to leave you with one last quote, because I think it's of a more modern day, even though he is no longer with us. Jay Kapinga said that he thinks we need to consider the possibility that our mission may be to help Muslims become better Muslims, more true to the high ideals of their religion and ours. And he gave that in a 1977 conference in Cyprus. And then the last thing I'll leave you with is when Sultan Qaboos came to power, both the Kapingas and the Bashes ended up working for the Sultanate. Dr. Bash worked for the Ministry of Health, and Reverend Kapinga worked for the Ministry of Culture. And they were critiqued for working for directly for the Muslim government. They were accused by many missionaries of modern terms, selling out. And Dr. Bash had a wonderful response. He goes, "Before we were salt contained in a shaker, but now partnering with our Muslim brothers and sisters, we're able to be shaken upon the entire Sultanate." And so there is this thing too of how do we work together, and how do we be salt and yeast in the context that we are. And I think that was Zwemer's legacy, is he was salt and yeast, and he affected the Arabian Gulf in ways that we will never truly know. The medical care provided in Kuwait, in Iraq, in Bahrain, in Oman, in Saudi Arabia, those legacies are enduring. And because of Zwemer, Christians are remembered fondly in the Gulf. And that is due to Zwemer's vision and commitment to the Arab people and to Muslims.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. In the 1970s, the Arabian mission is unraveling, and but most of the hospitals and mission stations close for a variety of reasons. But the mission in Oman, to some extent, still persists, not the hospital, but as the Al Amana Center. And I've been there and enjoyed it there. But in Bahrain, where Zwemer was, is curiously the only area of the mission that really has sustained itself in still a good way. The American Mission Hospital there is stellar. It's world class still, and has recently gotten some award for excellence. I don't remember the exact title on it, but the church that he was engaged as the first pastor of in Bahrain still exists, and the bookstore is still there. And so, you know, he put his print on it, and it had enduring and good effect. Yeah, there is this balancing act of course that needs to happen. You have to learn to live with other people, but on a more overarching way, I think Zwemer would adhere to that. The Great Commission tells us, you know, to go on mission. The Bible tells us to go to the ends of the earth. You know, that we're blessed to be a blessing, and that Zwemer works from you know, Jesus saying, "I have to go to other villages. You know, that's why I was sent." So he accommodates, you know, as he can accommodate, but he doesn't yield his desire to evangelize.
Thank you, Ruggles. Is there anybody else who's ready to jump in with a comment? If not,
I'll just add one last thing, is that I think the Alamana Center is a pretty exceptional expression of the mission work too, not just the hospitals in Bahrain. I think we do it pretty well where we're at. Thank you.
I would agree. Thank you all for being here. Vern, Stirk, do you want to share something?
Yes, I wanted to well, first say hi to Justin and others of you that I know well, and congratulations to Dr. Church. We've spent some time discussing some of these issues, and even though I come from a very different cultural setting in terms of our mission experience, I do want to pick up on what Dr. Jin Hong mentioned, his Christocentric anthropological approach. That is describes well the approach that we had in Chiapas, Mexico. And I believe that even though the Islamic world is a very different cultural kind of setting, I still believe I would like to keep the Christocentric anthropological approach very clear in the goal for mission. In other words, Justin, I feel that we do have to go beyond harmony with God. I think that's a good basis for the approach to other cultures. I just know very well that in Chiapas, we had to apply what I call that Christocentric anthropological approach in ways where we connected with redemptive analogies in the culture. And I think that as I have studied Islam, there are many redemptive analogies that can bring harmony, if you want to use that term, Justin, that can bring harmony between the Christian faith and the Muslim religion. I know that as we've talked about, Islam is a cultural religion, and that makes that approach a bit more difficult. But at the same time, I think maybe it makes it more possible, because if we show enough respect for the Islamic culture, I think we can find windows into bringing harmony, and out of that, present a evangelism that is Christocentric without being confrontational. I have a lot more that I could talk about in that in terms of my study, but I did want to add that to the conversation, because I do think we have to, in our if we're going to keep it Christian mission, we have to have Christocentric added to that approach.
Dr. Skirk, I'll come visit
Yeah, I'd
you
say the
when I'm in, Michigan next
Christocentric.
summer.
Yeah,
Vern, I'll
I'd say
come
the
visit you.
Christos.
Go ahead, Ruggles.
I'm sorry, Justin. I'd say the Christocentric has an interest in that the Bible tells you to evangelize, and the cosmocentric, if I could put it that way, ecumenism really searches for commonalities that you can work with people with. They both have their own areas where they make sense, but you can't do one without the other. I think Zwemer, Zwemer was very much and. It sounds like it's a very common word in the Bible, and, but he was very much service and evangelism. It didn't happen apart from each other. They begat each other. They enhanced each other. They gave each other momentum. So whatever commonalities you can work with are good, and using whatever in the Quran you can touch bases with, but you can't deny the work and death and sacrifice of Jesus. When that comes up, you got to say what's true.
I was going to say, Vern, I'll come visit you this summer when we're back in Michigan, and we can have a long talk about Islam and harmony and how far we go. Of course, I don't sacrifice anything of my beliefs and my Christocentricness here in Oman. In fact, it's why the Omanis find me fascinating, I think, is there's no way that you have to soften who you are to be here and do the work that we do. In fact, it's required of us. And yeah, Dr. Skirk,
I think, Zwemer was there 100+ years ago, and you're experiencing it now. Things change, but I think I get the sense in reading about Zwemer that in his time frame, that if you did not explain yourself in a theological way to them, they could not understand why you were there.
Right.
You're going there to do medicine and to help people, and they can understand that, but they're looking for your motive. If you can't explain it theologically to them, well, they think, well, you must have a colonial motive, or you're interested in oil money, or you're interested in something else. Now, I know over time, probably those knowledge of each other's cultures, has opened that up more. But I think that was the framework within which Zwemer was working. But it changes over time. And as you say, even post his death, the Arabian mission has some different philosophies. They tend to go for commonality, but don't sacrifice, or most of them don't sacrifice evangelism.
Well, Justin, I want to get back to you about stopping over when you're in Michigan. I would love to get together with you and Dr. Church and discuss this more deeply. I especially with Dr. Church have talked about something that we felt was important in our work, and that is the affirm and fulfill model of approach to evangelism. And I would love to discuss the details of that with you, which we found to be, along with what Dr. Church has talked about, the medical work, because that we weren't, it sounded like Zwemer in a way was very similar. We weren't trained medically, but we got involved in medical work because of the need expressed by the people. And once we got involved in that, we gained acceptance. And then we had to find a way, an approach in which we could not only affirm the culture, but not confront it in a negative way. And when we did that, we found that opened many doors through the medical work. It opened many doors to sharing that what I called Christocentric approach. We, of course, had the advantage, Justin, of that the people where we lived already had Jesus Christ as one of their deities. So we could affirm that very clearly, and that made that probably more easily acceptable than in the Islamic culture, of course.
Yeah, we'll have much to talk
Justin,
about. We'll have much to talk about. Yeah, I mean, the Islamic views of Jesus, they see him as a prophet. They actually believe that he's coming back, most of them, to help judge the world. So, I mean, there's a lot
Right.
there that
Right.
it's just the key part about his death and resurrection that we really kind of differ on. Yeah.
Justin and Ernest, look forward to visiting with you this summer.
Yeah, likewise.
Give one last call out to see if anybody else wants to speak up and jump into the conversation. We'll give you a minute while you're thinking about that to get in also one last set of commercials for the Reformed Church Center. This is our last program for 2021. We are here at New Brunswick will be much more concerned with things like getting to the end of the semester and getting papers turned in, and then those of us who get the paper, receive those papers, getting papers reviewed and graded, and then of course celebrating Christmas. And I hope you all have a blessed Christmas and holiday. And then we'll be back on January 19th at noontime with an understanding theological education in the RCA colloquy on looking at how we do training for other kinds of ministries. Everybody gets trained to be a minister of word and sacrament. Not everybody goes and gets a master's degree. So how do those other kinds of training go? And then we'll have other programs through the spring. I invite you to go and look at the Reformed Church Center page at nbts.edu, and you will see lots of things going on. We'll have the fellowships from this academic year presenting in March and April and things like that. And speaking of the fellowships, my last little bit of commercial, I've just posted the link in chat to go and find out about how you can apply for and create a proposal for one of our fellowships here at the Reformed Church Center. This is certainly a possibility for just about anybody. And if you have a question that you've wanted to explore in the area of RCA history, in the area of Reformed worship, in the area of RCA women's studies, a question that you've wanted to explore, and you've done maybe a little bit of preparatory work and have some ideas of what you could do to move it along a little further, and we could help here at New Brunswick, and think about applying. We'll be receiving applications for next year's fellowships until April 8th. I know that usually it's April 15th, but if you look at your calendar, you'll find out that a lot of us minister types are going to have other things to think about on April 15th this year. And so it's April 8th, just a week earlier. Anybody? Don't see any more hands, so I'm going to help us wrap things up. Thank you to Dr. Church for being here with us and sharing what he's been working on. Thank you to Steve Mann, who is running our technical aspect here and always is when we're here online with the Reformed Church Center. Thank you to Dr. Kim and to all of you for being here and being part of this. It's been wonderful to have you here with us, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.